Do not be afraid. Let's go.
Hey guys, it's Mark for Stack.B Gaming again, and today we're introducing a new series called Finding the Best Play. So before I go into what we're going to do in this series, I want to first frame the discussions that we'll basically be having. So, to my mind, there are three things that make a really good player, basically. So there's skill, teamwork, and tactics. So these are also the three things that Thorin's mentioned in his opinion. These are also the three things that make a team really, really good. So I'm just going to adopt these three things as being the best qualities that a team and individual players will try to work towards. So when they're bettering themselves, it'll be in reference to these three things. So the first one, skill, is really intuitive and really obvious to even very new players coming into the game. So for example, if they watch a high-class AWPer like Skadoodle or Kenny S, they'll instantly be able to pick up that this player is one of the best AWPers in the world. Really, really, really quickly. However, with the second two qualities, or second and third qualities, teamwork and tactics, these two aren't really obvious, even to some quite experienced players. You really have to know what you're looking for, and it only really comes... you only really notice it when you're watching through demos multiple times, trying to find exactly what a team's doing, how exactly they're interacting with each other. Some very, very subtle things come about when you're talking about tactics and teamwork. So these two things are going to be this series is going to place a large emphasis on those two things when we're going to be analysing some demos and some plays that players and teams make. There's also another thing that's outside of these three qualities that we will be talking about, and that is individual play. So we'll see it from Flusher as well, as this demo goes on in the background. So what I mean by individual play is to quickly analyze all of the variables in a given situation, and then to quickly, and in fact instantly, know what the best option is in order to attain a certain goal. So in Counter-Strike, that goal will be usually to kill as many people as possible, to plant the bomb, or to defuse the bomb, or to even survive if you're trying to save after a round. So those four things are pretty much all the objectives that a team and a player will have. So in reference to those four objectives, you have to analyze all the variables and then instantly determine what the best play is. And that is actually extremely difficult to do, mostly due to the time constraints that players have. So in chess, they have to do a very similar thing, where they have many different pieces, all of which move in very different ways, and at about, say, move 20 into the game, they'll generally enter a stage that is completely unfamiliar to them. Early in the game, a lot of stuff is very well documented in theory books and whatever, but in the late game especially, you're introduced with scenarios in chess that are completely foreign to you, and your ability to think on your feet and, again, to analyze all the variables and then to make the right choice is really what defines an excellent chess player. And I think this sort of logic can also be applied to Counter-Strike players. However, the one caveat to that is Counter-Strike players don't have a lot of time to work with. You know, a chess game can run over like up to 9 hours in some cases, maybe even longer than that. Counter-Strike decisions have to be made instantly, because of course Counter-Strike is not only a game of inches and seconds, it's really a game of millimeters and milliseconds. So the faster you can make a decision, and the faster you can make a right decision in particular, is really what defines a good player from a tier 1 player. So that is really what this series is going to be about, trying to figure out what pros are doing that makes them the best in the world. So, for example, Olaf Meister and Flusher from Fnatic. What things do they specifically do in rounds that makes them the best in the world? And of course, many players, when they're going through analyzing demos of Fnatic, they're looking at Flush and Olaf Meister. Some of these things are really, really subtle and not obvious at all. So again, that's really the objective of the series, to highlight these sort of things. Alright, so just to put an example to that introduction, I'm going to go back and analyze round 2 of this game that's been playing in this background, specifically the play that Flusher and Fnatic make at the end of round 2. Alright, so here we are with Flusher. This is the end, or towards the end of round 2, and as we can see, Fnatic lost the first round, and they decided to force buy with armor, pistols, and a few nades between them, as is the meta in European CS at the moment. So, focusing on Flush's equipment for a second, he has armor, helmet, frag, and CZ, and he's on the A bomb site by himself. So obviously this is not a lot of equipment to work with. So if they do decide to push A, as we can actually see they are, since we have the advantage of the minimap, Flusher doesn't, of course. So if they do decide to push, Flusher has very, very little to work with, so his chances of getting a lot of kills is next to 0. He also, okay, so he's Flusher, so he might be able to get 1, 2 at the absolute most, is what I'd say. Any more than 2 and you're getting into like 0.00, add however many zeros you want, and then a 1% to get more than 2 kills. So given that if Mouse decides to push in, Flusher is very likely either going to get no kills or at most 1, and again maybe 2, then it really isn't worth the fight, because you have to think about what he's losing in getting those 2 kills. So because Fnatic decided to force buy, their economy is pretty much in ruins at the moment. When you decide to force buy after a first round loss, it is critical that if you don't win, you have to save as much gear as possible in order to not be in a severe economic disadvantage going into your first buy round. Okay, so in round 4, if let's say every person on Fnatic dies in this round, then their round 4 buy, their full buy on round 4, is going to be a lot weaker, and they'll have a significantly lower chance of winning because of it. So we will restart the demo, and I'll actually play it at a lower speed so we can really focus on what Flusher hears and sees. Okay. Also turn up the volume. Okay, so 50%. He hears the door. Here's a flashbang. Here's footsteps. That's a nade hitting the ground as smoke. He decides to frag and then run away. Alright. So, remember, what did he hear? What did he hear and see? He saw the door open, he heard footsteps, he heard a flash pop, and he heard smokes. Or heard a smoke flashing down. It just happened to be the one that he's looking at right now. So those are 4 signs that players are around him. Now from that, he can determine that that means there's likely going to be at least 3 players, and given that it's a anti-eco from Mousesports, that is, they're versing ecoing players, they're not going to just have 3 players trying to take a bomb site by themselves. They're going to have at least 4. Just because they really don't want to lose this round, so they'll group up a lot in order to destroy Fnatic if it happens to be an A-site stack. So Flusher knows this, He knows that mouse sports are going to be grouped up, so he decides to hightail it out of there and throw a frag at the door and leave. Now, in my mind, this is the best decision that he can make, because, again, he's by himself. His chances of getting kills and do economic damage to mouse ports is very, very small. So he decides to back off, and instead, Fnatic, as we'll see, plays for exit kills, which is the smartest decision in this situation, because they know that mouse ports, or it's very likely that mouse ports, their players are low. I don't know if Fnatic actually knows that, as we can see their health. Fnatic obviously can't, unless it was JW that did the damage. Which, as a matter of fact, I think it was. I think it was a nade by JW in this round that caused all that damage. So Fnatic knows that mouse sports are low on health. So going for exits, it makes even more sense, because they might be able to get a few more kills. This is really, really metagaming stuff, but it's all really important in trying to find the very best play. Alright, so we'll accept that the best decision that Flushin made and his team also decide to do is to play for exits. Okay, so we'll continue the demo. There's one more thing I want to point out that Flusher does. Okay, it's that. So, again, I just mentioned that the mouse sports players are quite low. So, taking a few shots at a player jumping on top of red is actually quite a smart thing to do, because it's quite likely that that player might be low. If mouse sports is good, they wouldn't put a low player up there. They'd have Dennis in this case up there. But just on the off chance that mouse sports doesn't make that call, Dennis doesn't make that call, and somebody else is on top of red, then Flusher gets an instant free kill. It's the same thing with the nade that he threw in into door as it opened. He knows the players are low, so if he throws a frag, it's likely he might get a kill or two. So again, these really, really small things can there's basically a snowball effect that can go out throughout the game. All these small things add up over time, and even if they don't work most of the time, the times that they do work really, really are very significant, and can even sometimes decide games. Okay, so pretty much that's the end of Flush's play. I just want to show that. Alright, let's go back to normal speed. Alright, so, and of course, Fnatic decides to play for exits. Unfortunately, Olaf dies here. And unfortunately, the play didn't actually work. So we'll see that mouse sports come out expecting Pronax to be up here. He just gets instantly shot as mouse sports comes out. Even though that is unfortunate, even though the play didn't end up working, it was still the correct decision. Because you have to remember that Fnatic are at a significant disadvantage, and they made the best call in order to do as much damage as they possibly could in that round. And that really stemmed off what Flush's individual play was, which is, again, falling back when he knows that the mouse sports players are committing to the bomb site he's at with a lot of players. Alright, so what you just saw is basically the format that we're going to be running with in this series. So we'll be analysing all of the different variables that a player has to think through when they're making a critical decision in the middle of a round. We'll also be working on and focusing on team play and tactics, and to that end, we're also going to be analysing our own demos that we play on Faceit and on our Cybergamer Open Ladder, which we are a part of. So in doing that, we'll be able to hopefully share with you guys our own decision-making process, and also the reason why we decide to do certain things. Because when you're analysing a professional demo, it's really hard to work out exactly why a player does the thing that he does. So why he does one thing and not something else. So even though this series is trying to help with that, try to figure out why players do certain things, it's still really, really difficult, and sometimes we may get it wrong. So with our own demos, since we're the ones who play the games, we'll give you exactly the exact reasons why we did certain things and not others, since we're actually in the games. Alright, thanks for watching, guys, and we'll be back with another one real soon.